Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on integrating financial capability into employment programs, building a pathway to financial stability. Next slide, please. Before we get started with today's presentation, I would like to share some information with you on some housekeeping tips. Listening to the webinar. The audio for today's meeting can be accessed using computer audio or by calling in by phone. If you select computer audio, please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or prefer to listen by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099. The meeting code is 846-279-711. Please note, you do not have to add an attendee ID. Captioning. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found by clicking on the CC button in your Zoom control at the bottom of the screen. If you do not see the captions after clicking the button, please alert the host via the chat box at the bottom of your screen. You may also view captions in your browser at https://www.streamtextstext.net/event=NDI. Submitting questions. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct them accordingly. At the end of the webinar, we will have, after our panel discussion, we will have time for Q&A. If your question is not answered during the webinar, or you're listening by phone and not logged in, you may email your question to sbrown, S-B-R-O-W-N, @ndi-inc.org. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send a message to the NDI host, or again, you may email Shahida Brown at sbrown@ndi-inc.org. Please note, this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the National Disability Institute website, and you can go there by going to nationaldisabilityinstitute.org/resources/empowered-cities.webinars. Great. So as I mentioned, my name is Michael Rauch, and I'm the director of the Real Economic Impact Network at the National Disability Institute, and a part of the Empowered Cities team here at National Disability Institute. We're excited for a discussion this afternoon on integrating financial capability strategies into employment programs, building a pathway to financial stability. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I also want to go over our agenda. So first, we're going to share some information on Empowered Cities. We're also going to talk about the employment status of people with disabilities, and also talk about the financial needs of people with disabilities to help frame this issue or frame this conversation on why it's important to integrate financial capability strategies into employment programs. We're also going to talk about the impact of integrating financial capability strategies into our programs. Then we're going to go into a panel discussion, and we have 4 diverse partners who are going to share insight with us on how they've incorporated financial capability strategies into their employment programs. And the representatives of our panelists include those who are sharing it from the perspective from the disability-specific lens, through workforce development programs, the municipal lens, creating a wide array of financial capability strategies into summer youth programs, and a national program focused on financial action, which you're going to learn more about. I like that, financial action, that integrates within employment programs. We're also going to share with you some tools and resources that have recently been released, and then share some information with you on our upcoming webinar in December. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for those of you who are new to the National Disability Institute, I did want to spend a couple minutes just sharing a little bit of information about our organization. The National Disability Institute is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building a better economic future for people with disabilities. At the National Disability Institute, we're the first national organization committed exclusively to championing economic empowerment, financial education, asset development, and financial stability for all persons with disabilities. At the National Disability Institute, we affect change through our partners as well, through public education, policy development, training, technical assistance, and innovative initiatives. Next slide. At the National Disability Institute, we envision a society where people with disabilities have the same opportunities to achieve financial stability and independence as people without disabilities. To learn more, visit our website at www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org. Next slide. Great. So we're thankful for the support and the collaboration with City Community Development for leading and supporting Empowered Cities and the Empowered Cities Initiative. I would like to introduce Jasmine Thomas, who's the Senior Vice President of National Initiatives from City Community Development, to say a few words. Jasmine, thank you for joining us, and I'd like to turn over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Jasmine Thomas from City Community Development, and I'm so glad to be on this monthly call. As Michael said, City Community Development leads City's commitment to financial inclusion and economic empowerment for underserved individuals, families, and communities across the United States. Through innovative collaborations with municipalities, community groups, and leading local and national nonprofit organizations like National Disabilities Institute, City's thought leadership, expertise, products, and services are leveraged and harnessed to help expand opportunity for all. Next slide, please. As Michael mentioned, Empowered Cities is a partnership with NDI and municipalities, and our initiative aims to engage municipalities, community partners, and nonprofit service providers across the country to design, test, and deliver innovative and scalable solutions that expand financial empowerment, inclusion for people with disabilities and their families. Next slide, please. Michael, I'll turn it back over to you to walk us through the next step of the webinar agenda.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine, and thanks again for being with us today. So now what I want to do is just spend a few minutes looking at employment and financial empowerment, looking at the employment status and the financial needs of the disability community. Next slide, please. So as we look at the employment status of people with disabilities, we know that 31.4% of people with a disability are employed, with 74.9% of people without a disability employed. We know that it's an important piece that we continue to build the employment status of people with disabilities to help individuals meet their financial needs, but also to build an individual's financial well-being. Next slide. So the need for financial empowerment is evident. we know that 26% of working age people with disabilities live in poverty compared with 11% of those without disabilities. Disability is both a cause and a consequence of poverty. We also know that poverty and disability reinforce each other. And we also know that people of color with a disability face an even harder economic reality than those individuals, white individuals. Historically have not had access to targeted financial capability strategies. And today we're going to learn more on how different programs have really worked to increase the access to financial capability strategies to help increase the awareness, but also the access to these different programs. We also know that individuals with disabilities face myths that limit their financial empowerment, such as the myths surrounding public benefit programs, or possibly not being aware of protected savings options that individuals could potentially access. So this is why our conversation today is really important. It's important for us to really look at the employment programs that are available for people with disabilities, as well as the integration of financial empowerment programs and how they're working together to build a better financial future for all individuals with disabilities. Next slide. So before we turn it over to Jasmine and our panelists, I do want to share with you just some brief points on the positive impact of integrating financial capability strategies. So next slide. So why is integrating financial capability strategies into employment programs important? And we know that there's a growing body of work that shows that when human and financial capability services are bundled, when they're offered together, positive outcomes are achieved by individuals and their path to financial well-being. For the individual, integrated financial capability services can support long-term planning, greater educational attainment, improved employment status, and financial stability. And we know for the service professional, whether in workforce or development or working with a community-based organization, we know that for the service professional, when bundled services are offered, it improves program outcomes and it reduces turnover cost. So with that, and we're looking at the positive impact here, now we want to turn it over and have a panel discussion with our panelists today, led by Jasmine Thomas with Citi. And we're going to learn more about the positive impact of integrating financial capability strategies into employment programs. Our panelists will share examples and best practices, and you're in for a real treat with the information that they're about ready to share with us. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jasmine to introduce our panelists and lead this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think it is an important topic, and our panelists are distinguished and have a significant amount of experience, as well as leadership in this space that we all can learn from. And so our first panelist is Susan Ajak. She's the Director of Community Service at the City of St. Petersburg in Florida. Stephen Gold is the Disability Employment Initiative Grant Coordinator at Colorado's Department of Labor and Employment. We also have Laura Lennick. She's the Program Manager for Disability Initiatives at NDI, specifically through the Disability Employment Initiative, which is part of the National Training and Technical Assistance Team at NDI. Amelia O'Rourke Owens is the Director of Youth Financial Capability at America Saves at our friends at Consumer Federation of America. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So can you give us a bit of a sense of your organization and the workforce program that you lead? Specifically, can we start with Stephen? Hi, Stephen, do we still have you on the line? Okay, Stephen may be on mute. Susan, would you like to start us off? Hi, Susan.
So Jasmine, hold on just a minute. Brittany or Shahida, could you assist us? I think there might be an issue with unmuting line.
Hi, this is Shahida. I've been trying to unmute and it's not working. I see her here twice, so I don't know if her phone dropped and she's trying to call back in.
Okay, so we'll start with Amelia then, if that's okay.
This is Amelia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Take it away.
Well, I manage America Saves for Young Workers. It's an all-online behavior intervention to teach young and first-time workers how to save automatically. So in this capacity, I work with municipalities or independent youth employment programs all over the country. And those programs employ anywhere from 75 to 70,000 youth.
Very good, thank you. And now that we have you, tell me a little bit about the influencing factor that helped develop your program, specifically for workforce programs.
Sure, thanks, Jasmine. Well, at America Saves, we heard in our research with this cohort, and so I specifically focus on youth, which we define as 14 to 24-year-olds. And in our research with this cohort, they were absorbing the messages of the importance of saving, but no one was showing them how. So essentially, they were saying to us, yeah, we know that saving is important, but what does that actually mean? And more importantly to us at America Saves, we translated that into what does it look like to save? How does one do it? What are the mechanics? And what does that look like if you're a 14 to 24-year-old saving for the first time? So we have created this all online intervention to make that translation for these young workers.
Thank you so much for that, Amelia. And I have a few more questions, but I'll reserve them for later. Laura, did you want to kind of take us through some of the work that you've been doing at DEI?
Sure. Just to make sure you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, at I love this conversation because I can kind of give a national perspective. National Disability Institute has been contracted by the U.S. Department of Labor to serve as their national technical assistance and training provider for their disability and employment demonstration projects. And they include the Disability Employment Initiative, which Feed Gold is a recipient of one of those grants, and its predecessor, the Disability Program Navigator Initiative. And the purpose of these demonstrations is to help states build the capacity of the public workforce system to improve access to mainstream programs for both youth and adults with disabilities. And really the goal of all the programs that the Department of Labor has funded is to transition individuals with disabilities out of poverty and heavy reliance upon public benefits and into economic self-sufficiency in the middle class. And so that brings the reality that it includes employment, but also career planning and financial capability.
Very good. Thank you so much. And so, how have you seen so far the integration of financial capability programs within some of the work that you've done already, Laura?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we were, the first project, the demonstration project funded, was the Disability Program Navigator Initiative, and that was between 2003 and 2010. And during that time, NDI was working with the Department of Labor to incorporate asset development strategies, again, realizing that employment is one goal, but not the only goal. And so the Disability Employment Initiative, or DEI, which was funded in 2010, is the first U.S. Department of Labor initiative to incorporate financial capability strategies as a strategic service delivery component to enhance long-term economic self-sufficiency of individuals with disabilities. And one of the purposes of the DEI is to improve coordination and collaboration among employment and training and asset development programs implemented at both the state and local level. And I think when you are able to hear more from Stephen Gold, again, who is part of the Colorado DEI project, you're going to see that this is a key part to building partnerships in this space. And the only last thing, Jasmine, that I want to say, the DEI is sunsetting. The last round of funding ends in September 2020. And I remember when the Department of Labor put out the DEI in 2010, asset development was a new concept to many people in the workforce system. And so we worked through the years to build these strategies. But again, when you hear from Stephen, what I think is pretty cool about this, it now has become a norm. It has become organically known that in order to achieve employment, financial stability, financial capability, asset development strategies really need to be part of that plan.
Laura, that's really helpful because you tied in a lot of what is likely the premise of the work that Amelia's been doing to, make automation and online accessibility for the actual act of saving. You talked about how to frame it with respect to really creating those links through the main stakeholder groups and the key for building asset development within a labor or workforce strategy program and the partnership it took for the last 10 years to build that out. You also gave a great segue into Stephen. If the line is now open and he can hear us, Stephen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Great. Perfect. We got you. So Laura shared a bit about the fact that you're one of the partners of the DEI, and I know you've got some perspective about the work that's been happening in Colorado. Would you be willing to share with us some of the kind of high-level overview of where you all are on this work, as well as some of the influencing factors that got you into the space of blending financial capability with your workforce strategy?
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for having us here today. I would just like to say that I'm very fortunate to work with a state agency, the Department of Labor and Employment, and our local workforce area partners and our regional partners to really put forth the practice of the DEI strategic approaches. And one of the main approaches for us has been to increase the number of workforce entities functioning as an employment networks or working with an administrative employment network that provides additional service and technical assistance. And what that does is that helps us to provide or coordinate the delivery of services to Social Security disability beneficiaries. And with that comes a lot of focus around benefits planning, financial literacy, collaborative partnerships, as some of the panelists have mentioned before. And what I really appreciate about what Laura mentioned was that, we have the opportunity being a round 8 and final round project of the DEI to learn from both the prior rounds of DEI and the Disability Program Navigator project before us, that what's really important is policy development and sustainability, and then adjusting the policy as you go along to make sure that you're doing what you need to do for your customers with financial development. And it also really includes accessible career pathways, because people need to get on to their career pathway that's best for them and that they choose and that's accessible for them as quickly as possible. There's studies out there that show that people that don't get on the correct career pathway for them could take a $10,000 financial hit to their income every year. So all these things are integrated and important, but I'm excited to be here today to talk about the great work that our local workforce areas are doing with policy development and implementing these practices and services to customers.
Thank you so much. So you said a $10,000 potential loss to families if their career is not planned and aligned for them properly.
That is correct, and that is a huge, I think Michael talked about, that it's also a cause of poverty. So it's very important for us to provide those opportunities as quickly as possible to our job seekers with disabilities to get on that career pathway that they want and that works for them.
I thank you so much. And I'm going to come back to you on that because I think data points like that is helpful for us to not only make the case, but also reflect the dire need to make the connection between the two program systems that exist out there for people with disabilities. So thank you for that. We will circle back on a couple of other questions that we've got in the queue for you. But I wanted to make sure we bring in Suzanne into this conversation. Susan, are you on the line as well from Florida?
Hopefully, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I had two things muted, and I only unmuted one. So I'm from city of St. Petersburg, Florida, and we have local government. We do have quite a number of workforce programs, but ours specifically are related to youth employment. Within our office, we have 4, and the one that I do want to talk about is our summer youth program. Like Amelia, our program is a targeted age, but it's 16 to 21, and they are also coming from families that are income limited. So one of the things, this is a program that we inherited with some changes within the organization, and we partner with bully centers. They actually administer the program, work with private and public, meaning some of the city departments, maybe other governmental employers, and we share our wages. So we pay the dollars we contribute pays half of the salary, and the employers also pay for part of the salary. Our changes as far as financial inclusion and financial education actually have been incremental. One of the first things that we asked our partner to do is to require our young people to open up a bank account so that we could do direct deposit. There are about 150 interns over a 6 to 8 week period during the summer, and they are allowed to work up to 30 hours per week. Anything over that, the employer has to pay all costs for wages. As the city of St. Petersburg was recognized as part of the National League of Cities. We were part of a cohort of 8 communities throughout the city for financial inclusion systems and city leadership. And really as a result of that, we started incorporating, not only in this program, but in some other pieces of that financial empowerment. So the financial education was a component of it. This past summer, we also added higher education IDAs in working with another local partner, our local United Way, to encourage our youth to save money and really to get a better feel for, by saving money and over a period of time, how that money could increase, particularly with the federal grant that was tied to it. So for every $1,000, if they put in $1,000 by the end of the time period, they could walk away with $4,000 for higher education, whether that's college or vocational tech. And we're also incorporating some other things like wraparound services, recognizing that sometimes it's not just our intern that needs some assistance, but perhaps the family. As it relates to education, we're also ensuring that once they matriculate back into the regular school year, to make sure that they graduate with a diploma and not just a certificate of completion. So we're continuing to add additional pieces to it. We have a financial institution a partner that we have talked to, and one of the products that they offer is a non-custodial account for the checking accounts. Unfortunately, with our young people, sometimes there are situations where the family member may not be able to open an account because of prior practices or judgment. So it's been a learning process for us and incorporating it. I think that more importantly, It's also been a learning process for our nonprofit provider. The city is engaged in a number of things like Bank On, Suncoast, and the Financial Stability Network, but our managing partner for our program hasn't necessarily been engaged. So providing those opportunities for them to learn more about why we're asking for more things related to financial empowerment, and as they learn, getting to see them get excited about the potential for their interns to ensure that they have a much more successful future, not only in terms of learning those work skills but also from a financial aspect. It's not just about getting money. It's about what happens when you save that money and then work to improve yourself that much more to get to the goal that you hope to achieve.
Right. And so how does your program work with people with disabilities?
The program is open to all individuals. We have had a number of interns over the years who have had a variety of disabilities. Just listening to our other panelists and actually preparing for today's discussion, really reflecting on how do we reach out more to our community, our disability community. So I think the age group that we work with, particularly, it's a hard age group. I mean, the teenagers are not always tactful. And we've had a number of situations with some of our individuals, some of our interns with disabilities that have been, I don't want to say necessarily take advantage of, but we've had some situations where they've been put into a situation not knowing that was happening, and then the outcome was those individuals that thought it would be funny to do something, we fired them from the program. And the interns that I guess not necessarily that were selected as I guess I can't even think of the word. So the person that was selected, or the interns that were selected, continue on with the program and actually were successful in completing the program. But I think we could. I'd like to be able to talk to our nonprofit organization, as they're an organization that works with individuals with mental disabilities. So I'd like to see how I'd like to talk to them about how they're doing outreach to individuals with disabilities of all types.
Thank you so much. And so you're raising a number of good points that I hope we can get back to at some point, or maybe those on the line may be able to circle back with you after the call. But you're raising good points about the importance of really building cultural competence in our workplace and, broadly, but also the importance of an integrated workplace environment, meaning, when you have experiences, you have the ability and the lens to, when we're engaged with each other, we have a better opportunity to partner and understand each other, but also to really create diversity and support diversity that exists in our work life broadly. So you raised a number of good points that I think I know the other panelists may have some thoughts about, and also and those on the call. But Amelia, I'm wondering if you could talk about how America Saves, just similarly, how you all have partnered with organizations and worked with people with disabilities as part of your strategy.
Sure, thanks, Jasmine. America Saves as an organization has a close working relationship with NDI, has, did a lot of awareness raising, especially around our adult initiatives and workplace savings initiatives with ABLE accounts. Sometimes, targeting folks or adults or youth employees with disabilities is just really being intentional about your messaging, who you're trying to reach, and how you're trying to reach them. Within America Saves for Young Workers too, I do want to make sure that I highlight that a lot of our partner programs, whether it's the municipalities or independent nonprofit youth employment programs, have taken a number of different approaches, and through that partnership, we're supporting them. And so some of them, it may be that they've created a municipal department that really is focused on outreach and providing access and opportunity to youth and adults with disabilities, whether that's through employment initiatives or just making all city services accessible to those folks. So a lot of our America Saves model is based on partnerships. So a lot of our integration of it has been through the strength of those partnerships, Jasmine. I will say one other structural change that we've made for America Saves for Young Workers is that, our program is all online, and we use multiple communication streams to make sure that our information is always accessible to youth with disabilities. And so this includes offering videos and written materials, communicating via email and or text messages. These multiple vectors, while creating maybe a tiny bit more work, do mean that youth employees with disabilities have more avenues to receive the information as they're able.
That is really helpful. And is that website, have you worked with organizations to build it out to make sure it was accessible?
I would always defer to NDI on that one, actually. So if one of our partners really is, and it really is interested in making their online resources more accessible, I know that at America Saves, we've learned some really great tips that are important for creating that accessibility. That's a great question, Jasmine. So while I have those tips that I definitely pass along, if they're really looking to do an audit or something more robust, I would always refer that relationship to NDI. Again, I think highlighting the importance of partnerships when we're thinking about this population.
Absolutely.
And Jasmine, if I could just add to that really quickly, I'm sorry to jump in here. But one thing I will say is, as we started the partnership with America Saves, one of the things that they did right away before we launched the new Touch form and some of the others is that they went to make sure that that it was fully accessible, so that to make sure that individuals would be able to, with disabilities, with different abilities, would be able to access it. So that is something that they did, and we worked on that with Amelia, your colleague, Lindsay Ferguson. But just wanted to put that note in there. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. No, absolutely, and I think that's very helpful to know, particularly as it seems to be an opportunity for many to enroll and participate. So it's great to see that partnerships is a wonderful theme of this webinar. So speaking of partnerships, I'm going to shift to kind of what happens next, which is evaluating program impact. And so the question to all of you really is, what's the impact of some of the work that you've been talking about? I know some of you have been working on it 10, 5, just a couple of years, but just from a kind of a systems-wide level or a community level, or a participant level, how do you evaluate impact, and how do you begin to kind of assess what next steps are? And so can I ask either Laura or Stephen to start?
How about Stephen? I'll start on kind of what we're seeing at a national level, and then you could talk about what you're seeing at a community level. As I had said, Jasmine, it was a hard kind of road as we started, because you don't like to think of it. It seems like a logical piece to add, but asset development was not necessarily at the table and part of the employment plan. So at an individual or participant level, some things that we have seen, we look at things as systems change more so than when you look at numbers. And so some things that we've seen at an individual level, financial education was offered as part of core services for all customers. We refer to the American Job Centers. They are what these demonstration projects are targeted at. And so through the center, they saw what DEI projects and the previous Navigator projects were doing and realized the benefit, the need for financial education, and incorporated that as a core service so anybody who comes into the job center. The job centers, through the financial strategies that have been incorporated, have become known as a community resource, a location for financial education, volunteer tax assistance, benefits planning, as Stephen said, and other asset development strategies, including ABLE accounts. We've done a lot with the My3 taxes over the years, and so many job centers have become My3 taxes sites. And then on a systems level, what I really think, again, I use the word cool about this, is that in the legislation, we've also seen changes in the public workforce legislation over time. And now we're seeing that people with disabilities are a targeted population to receive support across workforce systems and partners at all levels under this legislation. We're seeing people with disabilities exiting beneficiary status and poverty level subsistence to enter into competitive integrated employment. And then we're seeing financial capabilities for individuals with disabilities, as I said, not only specifically included into the Disability Employment Initiative language, but it was also incorporated into the new workforce legislation. I just want to end with you. Stephen mentioned what they're doing with workforce employment networks, the Ticket to Work. And I just want to share some statistics. In terms of the Disability Employment Initiative requires those who receive funding to be part of the Ticket to Work program and to become a workforce employment network either at the state or local level. That we do have data on. And we do know that according to the latest DEI workforce outcome data, which was June 2019, employment networks associated with current and former DEI grantees generated 1.1 million in EN revenue over the past year and 22 million in revenue since the beginning of the DEI. And participation as an EN provides an additional revenue source for job centers to leverage funding, and they use that to help them maximize services for customers with disabilities.
Wow, that is a fantastic list of outcomes, as well as some progress that's been made in this space. And that's all within the last, sounds like 10 years, Laura?
Yeah, it started really in 2003 when the Disability Program Navigator was funded. It was part of the conversation, but it really wasn't put into a requirement until the Disability Employment Initiative was funded in 2010. So I'd like to say that it kind of started, bubbling up before 2010, but when 2010 came, and with the Disability Employment Initiative, what the Department of Labor was saying is this is a strategic service delivery component that can help individual youth and adults with disabilities move into the middle class and obtain long-term economic self-sufficiency.
Fantastic. And so, Stephen, I'm going to move into my last question to you and then open it up to the audience, only because I'm afraid that we are 15 minutes out from closing, and I want to make sure there's ample time for the audience to ask any question that they have. Of course, if there's silence, I'll circle back with some additional thoughts. But Stephen, so you kind of, I want to connect Laura's last point about the importance of public policy and your initial point, which really was around policy development and sustainability being core pillars of success for you all in Colorado. Did you want to tell us a bit about the impact that you've seen in this space, as well as any kind of ways in which you all have begun to kind of think about or measure your success to date?
So that's a great question, and thank you for the opportunity. I would just like to say that I'm fortunate to work in a state that has local control. So all of our grant workforce areas that are working on the DEI grant, they have done a remarkable job of partnering with agencies in their community. And one of the things, again, I think about being fortunate, being around a project of the DEI, is that we've learned from the past projects on functions like the interagency resource team. So we are intentionally, bringing services into the customer at the Workforce Center, not just that we provide, but from our partner agencies, and creating a team that's very driven by the job seeker with a disability and leading that team to provide resources instead of sending the job seeker out to different agencies and creating that additional unintentional barrier to receive the services. So our policy development is really focused in the local areas with local area policy development right now and the local workforce boards. They're all looking at, how they're utilizing the Ticket to Work incentive funds that come down, because my understanding is that those are unrestricted funding. So I really appreciate what the local workforce areas are doing right now in making sure that they have a policy that takes that incentive funding, at least in part, and turns around and puts it right back into serving the job seekers with disabilities, so they can continue to get good service. I also think it's vital that we include the customers with our job seekers with disabilities in focus groups, surveys, and other methods to make sure that our services are effective and that we take their voice into account right up front when we're designing programs and resources that can assist with that. So I think those are key areas of our development right now. And also, our partnerships. We may not always be the expert in that particular resource, so relying on our agency partners at the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Centers for Independent Living, and our community agency partners that serve customers with disabilities, to rely on those partnerships and to, again, bring the services into the centers, the workforce centers, is one of the major steps in that. And I also think creating the welcoming environment through universal design is equally important, because that helps us focus on all the areas. We could do a really good job in benefits planning, but if we don't focus at all on work-based learning, for example, then you may have a lot of people that go through our programs that are educated or trained, but when they're going out into the workforce and competing against people that have prior work experience, they may run into difficulties. So I think the comprehensive approach has been very important for us as well.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to underscore one point that you made, which is this sense of kind of listening to the consumer and developing partnerships across key stakeholder groups to really make sure that programs are meeting consumer needs as being a critical part of success as well, and really bringing those results to bear. Michael, can we open up for any questions?
Yes, so we have some that have come in, and just to let everybody know that if we don't get to your question, you can send an email to ask@ndi-inc.org, and I will put that in the chat box. But one of the questions that had come in, and I wrote it down, but now I can't see who sent it, but I thought it was a really good question. And then it was asking about, is there a difference in financial education programs for youth compared to adults? And so, Amelia, I don't know if you would like to address that, or Jasmine?
Yeah, this is Amelia. I can take a quick answer, which is yes. Definitely, I think so. Young people's brains are different than adults. Their financial realities are very different adults. And then particularly if we're talking about youth who are differently abled than their peer youth, even more so. So yes, definitely financial capability efforts. I would strongly encourage using one if you're working with a youth population that's targeted for a youth population. And that's mostly because their financial realities are so different than adults. And then on top of that, I would say that, at America Saves, and Michael, you teed us up for this perfectly, but at America Saves, we really focus on financial action. And I think that to me is I mean, of course, this is a very self-serving comment, but a lot of young people are going to learn through those experiences. So any financial capability programs or curricula that you can find that are action-oriented or experience-based are going to be more valuable for young people. Of course, they might also be useful for adults, but I think in particular for youth, I would really center that as a priority.
Thank you.
Great.
Amelia, I couldn't have said it better.
Jasmine, another question that came in is, what do you suggest a person with a disability do if they are told by Division of Vocational Rehabilitation that they cannot work?
Ooh, I feel like that's a question for Laura or Stephen to give us some thoughts.
Stephen, do you want to answer this? Do you want?
Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of our partners at the Division of Voc Rehab, but I can tell the person with disability that's concerned about that is that they do have advocacy and grievance procedures built in. So if you disagree with that decision, you know, you can avail yourself of those opportunities. You can ask your DVR counselor, you know, what those opportunities are. You can ask them to explain why, you know, they came to that conclusion. And again, if you disagree with it, I would, you know, take advantage of your, you know, your rights to challenge those assertions. If that's the case, you know, there may be opportunities to work with other agencies or community partners. There may be a reason why they can't do that in that particular state with that particular funding reason. So I would say if you want to work where there's a will, there's a way, and I would just find a partner agency that could assist you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Laura, is there anything you wanted to add on before we move to the next question?
Thanks, Jasmine. I would add to that. When both Steve and I were talking, there are American Job Centers. They're called sometimes different things in different states. They are public workforce centers that have been put into place so they can support people who are looking for education, training, and employment. And I would also suggest that is an avenue that you look at too. That is one of the community partners that Stephen was referencing. So it could be, as Stephen said, something to do with funding, but I would recommend that you look at that. There are American Job Centers in each state and local area. There is a public website. I'll put it in the chat box. I'll put the website for that. It's a service locator where you can find them. I would think that from the view of, I would think everybody on this webinar is, if you want to work, there is a way to work. And so there are options within your community.
Thank you. Michael, do you have any? I see the questions are coming in fast and furious.
They are,
Maria,
and we're answering some of them and online as well. So, but another one that came in, which I think is really a good question, and I know we're running out of time, but Stephen, you had mentioned universal design, and so the question is can you define universal design?
That's a great question.
Universal design means. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. So universal design is a set of standards out there. You can research it on Google, but I would say that what it does is it creates the maximum opportunity for any agency, classroom, office space, program to make that program as accessible as possible for all people from all backgrounds without the need to have to provide many additional accommodations, although it doesn't eliminate the need for accommodations totally, is the best way to describe it. It could be a physical issue, like you have a curb cut that many different people can use. You know, somebody that's a delivery person, somebody that's using a wheelchair, somebody that's skateboarding can use that curb cut to access that pathway. That's just one example. Creating welcoming environments, I think, is the first principle, and there's like 7 or 8, depending on whether you're in a classroom or an office. But I think the first guiding principle is the most important one, creating the welcoming environment, because if you have a welcoming environment, you're focused on all your customers and you're going to do what you can to remove those barriers. And that's what I would say. It's as much barrier removal as possible so people can enjoy the programs, the spaces, and the services.
Fantastic.
Great.
And there was a wonderful article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review about the disability rights movement's leadership in the curb cut planning strategy that all cities have around accessibility for wheelchair users or anyone else who has a mobility challenge. And the article, I can definitely share with NDI, really shows the importance of universal design from both a theoretical but also a practical win standpoint. So that's a great question. We have 4 minutes left, and I see that we have just a few more that have come in. Michael, I know you have not finished your slides. Would you like to take one more question and then wrap up?
Yeah, we'll do one more question and then a brief response here. And the question is, can you list a few of the programs that you would use with youth for financial education? And I'll just put a plug. We on our NDA's website, you can go to the National Disability Institute website, and we have different tools and resources that are listed for financial education and financial education for youth as well. And I know Maria put in a resource, my colleague Maria put in a resource in the chat box as well with the Consumer Protection Bureau. Does anybody else have additional suggestions on a financial education program specifically for youth?
You could, this is Susie with St. Petersburg. You could also check with your financial institution partners, because a number of them do have community outreach, and some have some of the programs are specific to the youth.
And Michael, this is Amelia. I would say if we we define ourselves first and foremost as financial action and not financial education, but America Saves for Young Workers is available to anyone who is employing at least one youth and offers the option of direct deposit. Those are the only requirements. It's a completely free program, and it will teach the mechanics of automatic savings and then send automated communications delivering what is high altitude financial education to the youth employee directly. So America Saves for Young Workers is another possibility if it's the right fit for that earning opportunity.
Great.
Thank you. And I think that wraps up the Q&A portion of the program for the conversation. Michael, I'll turn it over to you to take us through the next couple of slides, and we're going to be ready.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for moderating this panel. And thank you to Susie Ahok with the City of St. Petersburg, Stephen Gold with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, Amelia O'Rourke Owens with America Saves Young Workers, with the Consumer Federation of America, and of course my colleague Laura Glenick with the Disability Employment Initiative National Training and Technical Assistance Team here at the National Disability Institute. As we do close out, we just want to share with you some new tools and resources that we have available. Next slide, please. So we have a variety of free resources that are available. You can go to empoweredcities.com to download a variety of free materials that are designed specifically for municipalities and community partners. Next slide. Our quick reference guide. This is really something that we created a few years ago and keep building upon it. And it's really been popular with the field. As we've listened to the field and how you wanted to get your information, and you shared quick reference guides are the way to go. So we have a variety of quick reference guides here that are on the Empowered Cities website. A couple of them that are new are the Integrated Financial Capability Services, incorporating savings options for people with disabilities into your financial empowerment program, and Lead the Vision Forward, which is a quick reference guide that provides municipalities the steps they can take to integrate financial inclusion activities. We also have a variety of briefs And the most recent one that's on our website is Lead the Vision Forward, that again goes deeper to provide municipalities on how they can further enhance or include people with disabilities in their financial empowerment programs. So please go to our website and check those out. Next slide. Again, I'd like to say thank you to Jasmine and the City of Community Development for their support of Empowered Cities and for participating on today's webinar. Next slide. I hope you all will join us on December 3rd at 3 p.m. Eastern for our next webinar. We recently surveyed financial counselors and financial coaches from across the country, and on December 3rd, we'll be sharing the results. And the webinar is Building the Capacity of Financial Counselors and Financial Coaches to Serve People with Disabilities. The findings have been very interesting, and so in addition to sharing the data from the survey, we'll also be sharing some recommendations as well. So we hope you will join us for that webinar. Next slide. And again, let us know how we can support your work as you're working to integrate financial capability strategies into your financial coach or into your employment program or any program that you might be offering within your organization. You can reach out to myself or Maria here at the National Disability Institute. Please sign up for the listserv, and on our website you can go to empoweredcities.com to be able to sign up for that. And if you have any questions, I think it was put in the chat box, but you can also send any technical assistance questions you have or any additional questions from this webinar to ask@ndi-inc.org. I thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.